Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome into Locked On College Football Kickoff Live. That is Alex Dono from Locked On Canes. I'm Drake Toll from Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making Locked On College Football Kickoff Live your lunchtime listen every Friday. Alex, look, the news is broken about SMU, Stanford, and Cal going to the ACC. I can tell you this much. Yesterday, I was flushing the toilet as one does, accidentally knocked my college class ring into the bowl, flushed it away forever. Gone. It's gone. It's over. It's gone. And it's the second most embarrassing thing that's happened this week because the first is Stanford, Cal, and SMU going to the ACC. You've got a team in that conference for how long?
You know, the SMU one is the one that I can stomach a little bit because Dallas is not that far away from the other ACC institutions. And I'm sure none of the ACC teams would mind going into Texas and doing some extra recruiting. These Northern California teams, though, Drake, there's a reason why, with all the realignment and additions the Big Ten have made and the SEC and the Big 12, why everyone has passed to this point on Cal and Stanford, because they're not moving the needle athletically. And then you add in the logistics, the travel costs, because listen, this is college football kickoff live. All right. We're focused on one sport, the biggest revenue sport. You also have to consider non-revenue sports. You have to consider swimming and diving. You have to consider golf teams making these trips to Northern California and from Northern California, because really the heavy burden is on travel is going to come to Cal and Stanford. And again, these are not, teams within the Pac-12 that move the needle like the other ones who have already been picked up by other conferences. So I hate almost everything about this, okay? The only part of it that is at least somewhat sensical is the idea, and, this is one of the things they ironed out in bringing these three schools in are, in the case of SMU, they're not going to be taking any of the TV revenue for 9 years. And Cal and Stanford are only going to be taking 30% of the revenue share during that time. And so, there's talk of 50 to 60 million extra dollars in revenue that will be distributed throughout the conference. So this is bringing some more money in, but it's a move of desperation. And that's what it reeks to me, Drake. It reeks desperation.
Alex, we're in a position where the ACC is building a safety blanket with the knowledge that Florida State is likely going to jump ship. UNC obviously is unhappy. I don't think Clemson and Miami are going to sit around in the ACC when those two brands leave. It's inevitable at this point. These three teams were added just so that TV deal with ESPN, just so 15 teams are in this league so that TV deal cannot be reworked. But I can tell you this, ESPN's not going to like that. And there are a whole lot of executives right now that are laughing what the ACC just did.
Yeah, and one of the questions I've been asked, since this rumor mill, which has turned into fact today, has been churning is this going to be enough to appease the Florida States and the Clemsons and the UNCs and the Miamis? And I don't think it's a matter of appeasing them, especially Florida State and UNC, who have probably been the most vocal about this. I don't think this is making them happy. I just think the reason why Florida State is still a member of the Atlantic Coast Conference is they've not yet found an affordable way to leave. It's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of when, not if. As soon as they can figure out a way to finance a buyout, or I'm sure most of these ACC institutions have legal teams combing over that grant of rights agreement, trying to figure out a loophole somewhere. To this point, they've not been able to find one because that is more than 100-year-old precedent that is kind of defining that grant of rights agreement. But, something we have to remember, Drake, is every single year it becomes just a little bit cheaper to buy your way out of it. So it's only a matter of when, not if.
Dono, Locked On College Football Live. We've got a lot. We'll recap last night's Florida and Utah game. We're going to preview LSU and Florida State this weekend, Colorado and TCU as well. But I want one big prediction, one massive prediction about the NCAA from you.
Well, here's something I'm sure we're going to talk a lot more about on the show today, but there's so much hype this year. Coach Prime in Colorado, Shedeur, the roster turnover, more than 80 scholarship players are new there in Colorado. All this hype, I'm telling you right now, that Buffalo's team is not going to win more than 2 games this year. Wow. And maybe that's not a bold enough prediction because 2 wins would actually be an improvement from an obviously completely different coaching staff, completely different roster. They only went 1-11 last year, Colorado. All this Colorado hype, Drake, they're not going to win more than 2 games this year. And listen, I think they're laying foundations there. I think Coach Prime is going to end up making Colorado more of a power than they are now, but they could easily open their season 0-5. If you look at that schedule, they've got TCU opening up the season. It would take a miracle to win that game. They're against Nebraska, who obviously didn't have the greatest of debuts, but on paper, they should still beat Colorado. You play against an improving Colorado State in-state rival team in week 3. Then you're against Oregon and you're against USC. So that's a 1-4, potentially 0-5 start there. And it doesn't get a whole lot easier for the Buffs. So I think that team is not going to win more than 2 games this year.
Dono, money is where my mouth is on this one. My big pick to shock college football this year is, get this, it's crazy. Everybody lean in here. Texas doesn't go to the Big 12 championship game. It is everybody has picked UT to win the Big 12 outright and maybe even go undefeated. It's the best roster in the league. Dono, it's the best roster since 2019 Oklahoma in this league. They will lose to Alabama. They will lose to TCU. They'll lose to Kansas State. They'll get upset by Baylor. Texas finishes 8-4. And before everybody goes crazy, hasn't this always happened? Every year we say, this is the year. This is it. Texas is back. And they never are. So I, for one, am not falling for this trap. That was a topic of conversation amongst our hosts in the college football conference previews as well. And Alex, speaking of those, we talked to everybody across the Locked On College channel about their conference and what to watch out for across the country, which games, which players, what is most important to keep an eye on in week 1. We look at the Pac-12, the ACC, and we start with Craig Schmann of Locked On Big Ten.
There are so many great college football stories just in the Big Ten. I'm about to explode. I can't wait for this season to get up and rolling. First of all, let's start with the Ohio State Buckeyes. There is so much pressure on this football team and Ryan Day. You know that Ryan Day can go through his 5th year, get to the Michigan game undefeated. He will have won 90% of his games at that point in the 5 years. And if he loses to Michigan the 3rd straight year, I don't have to tell you what's going to happen. Meanwhile, the quarterback battle going on there, Kyle McCord and Devin Brown, I think both guys are going to take snaps in Bloomington against the Indiana Hoosiers. And speaking of the Hoosiers, Tom Allen, 23 portal kids on the roster, a complete redo over there. The Jim Harbaugh suspension begins against East Carolina this weekend. Offensive coordinator Sherrone Moore also out. He has to sit out a game. This is going to be it. So defensive coordinator Jesse Minter will be the head coach for this game. And don't forget, Jim Harbaugh's 84-year-old father, Jack Harbaugh, is going to be an assistant head coach for this game. It's unbelievable. You can't make this stuff up. Also, former Michigan quarterback Cade McNamara, he's now at Iowa. Look, at Michigan, he won a Big Ten title, and he got to a playoff game. Now, he's going to go to Iowa. He doesn't have to be awesome. Look, last year, Iowa, their defense was great. Their offense stunk. So all Cade McNamara has to do is just be mediocre. Just be okay. Bring the defense and the offense closer together for complementary football, and Iowa could be representing the West in the Big Ten championship game this year. A couple of new coaches. Of course, Matt Rule, the new head coach of the Nebraska Cornhuskers. They're very excited about him there. They opened up the season against Minnesota last night. And Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. The Badgers take on Buffalo to start the season. Fickell and offensive coordinator Phil Longo are changing everything up at Camp Randall. They're going to run this air raid offense. What's Wisconsin known for? Big, beefy offensive linemen and big power running backs, right? No, they're airing it out. Maybe. I did a little research, found a little nugget this week. When Phil Longo was at North Carolina, you know he ran the ball 45% of the time. Maybe a much more balanced attack at Camp Randall. We'll wait and see. All right, Sunday. Big Ten's on national TV. Northwestern Rutgers, 12 o'clock CBS. Only game in town. Probably the last 2 teams I picked to put on national TV, but that's just me. I still love it. I love all things Big Ten. Let's get back to the Saturday games here. Most Big Ten games are like double-figure point spreads, some 20 to 30 points as well. One game to keep an eye on right here. Write it down. Fresno State at Purdue. Purdue's only a 3.5-point favorite in this game. Fresno is coming off of back-to-back 10-win seasons. They've won the last 4 bowl games. Their defense only gives up about 19 points per game. They could be tough for Purdue. Of course, Ryan Walters making his debut as the head football coach. By the way, his mom is singing the national anthem at Ross-Ade Stadium. And, of course, Hudson Card. the transfer quarterback from Texas. He was at Texas. He saw the writing on the wall. Quinn Ewers is there. Arch Manning is there. He was never going to see the field. So he's going to West Lafayette, and he's going to be the quarterback of the Boilermakers, and he might be the most intriguing quarterback in the conference this year. So enjoy all the games. For Locked On Big Ten, I'm Craig Sheeman.
What's up, everybody? Candace Cooper here, Locked On ACC, and I'm here to talk about the best matchups out of Week 1. You have got some really good ones, but the one that you should have your popcorn ready for is Florida State and FSU. It'll be must-see TV that Sunday night at 8 p.m. The Seminoles are going to try and hold it down for the conference. They're going to let everybody know that they are here to be the ACC champions this 2023 season. Jared versus the boys. You got Johnny Wilson, Jordan Travis, some very talented players ready to lock and load. But if you're looking for some inter-conference matchups, I'm trying to tell you Duke and Clemson will be a good one on Monday. Will the Clemson Tigers be able to keep their reign rolling as they try to defend their ACC title? Duke is a team that nobody saw coming last season, but will there be film on them this year? Remains to be seen how well they can produce under Mike Elko in year 2. It's not a fluke, according to them. So I want you guys to be locked and loaded on the Blue Devils, quiet as it's kept. Last matchup, I would say, is Louisville and Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is a team that has been flying under the radar for me and Kenton Gibbs. If you listen to our show, Coach Key has those boys ready to go, but it is Louisville and Coach Brom who are trying to bring back a new era of Cardinals football. Can you have a strong quarterback in Plummer? Can you find and rejuvenate this defense and keep things going? That's what the real questions are. Excited to see how it all plays out. Some really good games for your weekend. Thursday through Monday, the ACC is fully loaded. They have so many games top to bottom that are going to be exciting, so don't forget to check it out. And check us out at Locked On ACC on Twitter if you want to talk about us or talk to us during the football weekend. But more important than that, follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time.
Spencer McLaughlin here for Locked On Pac-12. Only one game this weekend in the conference has a point spread in single digits, but there's still a lot to watch for this weekend because you're going to be looking at teams that are trying to win the Pac-12, trying to make a statement this weekend one way or another. Let's start with Colorado. They've got the big noon kickoff game against the reigning runners-up in college football in TCU down in Fort Worth. They're going to be greater than 20-point underdogs in that game. And everybody wants to know only about 75 different things about Coach Prime's team, most notably all the new players that they brought in. What does it look like? How competitive are they? Do they cover a 20-point spread? Do they keep it close? Do they hang around? Or do they get the doors blown off them and look like they're in for another low single-digit win season in 2023? Then you have the Washington Huskies, who play a Boise State team that's been a thorn in the side of many Pac-12 football programs over the years. They're a 2-touchdown favorite in Seattle. What does Michael Penix have in his new kind of revamped offensive line? Are his weapons just as good with the chemistry that they had a season ago? Many expect that to be the case, but that's a Boise State team that you should not take lightly, even though they're heavily favored in the game. But the most interesting game individually is Cal going at North Texas. The Bears are trying to become bowl eligible this year. Justin Wilcox might be coaching for his job this season. He might need to get the Bears to a bowl game to retain his position as head coach of the California football program. They are a 7-point favorite at North Texas. Now an American Conference team on the road. Sam Jackson's going to be their starting quarterback. Look to see what we get from him and what to expect from him as the season goes on. And lastly, don't overlook UCLA. They're expected to play up to 3 quarterbacks this weekend in a quarterback-rich conference. It's interesting to see who's going to emerge and if one player does emerge at the quarterback position for Chip Kelly in 2023.
Just a reminder that SEC, Big 12, and HBCU coming up next. Dono, I don't think any conference college schedule is crazier than whatever McLaughlin was wearing in that last video. Lot of boring stuff going on in college football this weekend.
Well, the thing I am excited most for is the LSU FSU game, because 2 top 10 teams, that could show you one of them is a national title contender. And if the other one loses a close game early enough in the season, they still have time to brush themselves off and recover and get back into that conversation.
That game makes the SEC and the ACC the de facto most entertaining conferences this weekend, and especially in a week filled with 20-plus point spreads and cupcake schedules. There is one game. It is the one game that stands out, LSU, Florida State, and it is our game of the week.
Yeah, and you know what?
Caroline Fenton of Locked On LSU here on Locked On College Football Kickoff Live. LSU, Florida State, biggest matchup in the country this week. Did the Tigers win?
It's a good question. My heart says yes.
Yeah,
my
the
head
answer is
says
yes. You're supposed to
perhaps.
say yes, Caroline.
My head says perhaps. And I think that this is such a tough game for me, just taking my fandom and my emotional investment out of it. It's tough for me to pick because these two teams are so evenly matched. Because you're going into this game with two teams that overachieved expectations last year, two teams that return their starting quarterbacks, two teams that return a ton on the offensive line, two teams that return their leading receivers, two teams that return their leading rushers, and two teams that return their top defensive players. So you got a ton of continuity and a ton of turnover from year to year. And you also have two teams that have expectations that have exponentially risen from last year into this season. Because Florida State and LSU are both going into this season as top 10 teams. And both of these teams are going into years with gettable divisions and conferences. Like this season, the SEC West is really up for grabs. Alabama's coming in to a questionable year, two new coordinators, don't know who's going to be the starting quarterback. Texas A&M also has a lot of questions, so it really is anybody's West. And I look at the ACC, and I think it's the same thing. Clemson, not quite sure what's going to pan out with them. Can Drake May really carry UNC to an 11-1, 12-0 season? We have yet to see that be decided. So it could be Florida State's ACC and it could be LSU's SEC West. And, you win this game and your hopes for the college football playoff are still alive. You lose this game, then you can still go 11-1 in the rest of the season and perhaps win a conference championship, but your margin for error just gets that much slimmer. So the stakes are high for both teams and the expectations are high for both teams. So it's tough for me to pick, but I lean LSU in this one, just simply given what this team accomplished last year, I think is more impressive than what Florida State was able to do. Florida State had a solid record at the end of last season, but Florida State also didn't beat a single ranked opponent on their schedule. LSU was able to take down an undefeated Ole Miss. LSU was able to take down an Alabama team with the best quarterback in college football last season. So I think that LSU is just going into this game a little bit more battle tested.
Yeah, from Jaden Daniels to Jordan Travis and Harold Perkins, who I think everybody's excited to watch hit the football field again. And you talk about Jared Verse, right? You've got NFL talent across the field in this game on both sides. You mentioned how much is coming back for each of these teams. If there's an edge anywhere for one of these two squads, where is it? Where's the hole that somebody could exploit?
I think the hole is LSU secondary. And that's why I think the defensive line is the most important position group for LSU going into this game, is because LSU basically rebuilt its secondary, or more so its cornerback room, for the second year in a row. LSU last year, Matt House and Brian Kelly, defensive coordinator Matt House, were forced to basically build up the entire cornerback room through the transfer portal. They're finding themselves doing that again. LSU only had one returning scholarship corner on the roster, and that was LaTerrence Welch, who was a true freshman last season and saw limited reps. So we don't know what this cornerback room is going to look like. We don't know if Matt House can make something out of a whole lot of questionable pieces for the second year in a row. I mean, Brian Kelly even talked about Sage Ryan, safety and nickel, even taking snaps at corner. So that concerns me, that the depth is so little that you've got safeties playing corner. So I think that if LSU's defensive line can step up and get pressure on the quarterback, then that takes a lot of the load off of the secondary. But that job got so much more difficult given the news that defensive tackle Mason Smith is suspended for the first game of the season. So if Florida State's offensive line can protect the quarterback and the defensive line is going to have to do a lot more work, I'm not sure how many battles the secondary is able to win against Florida State's experienced and massive receivers.
Caroline, you said that this game is going to be close. You lean LSU. Finally, give me the prediction here. How do these four quarters play out? A final score, who wins?
I would say final score 31-28 Florida State. I think it's going to be fairly high scoring. just because you've got so many. You've got two offenses with so much experience, and you've got two offenses that want to run the ball and that want to throw the ball. They've got two balanced offenses. Like neither of these offenses are one-trick ponies. I would say at the half that Florida State is up maybe by a field goal or maybe by a touchdown. We've seen LSU, at least last year, they were a slow starting team. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the pivot of the game be massive LSU defensive play. Last year, it was almost like clockwork. Like it was almost weird and eerie that LSU would start slow and it would take either an interception or a big sack or a strip sack or whatever it might be, just a massive defensive play to just unlock this LSU offense. Like it was crazy the way that a big defensive play could energize this team. So I think that Florida State could be up at the half. And I think that it's going to take a big defensive play from LSU for them to just, to let loose and to play the kind of football that they want. And I believe that LSU would pull away in the second half and ultimately take that game 31-28.
31-28, the final score. That's Caroline Fenton, Locked On LSU, right here on Locked On College Football Kickoff Live. We got so much more coming up here. College Football Kickoff Live. The Florida Gators. Man, they sucked last night, Dono. I'm sure you were so torn up about that. Prime time in Colorado this weekend and some realistic expectations for Coach Prime and the Buffs. That is next. Dono?
Well, folks, buying those last-minute tickets to see your team play on Saturdays doesn't have to be a stressful experience. I know in the past it might have been. Are you getting the best deal? Guys, you always get the best deal at Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. Killer deals on those last-minute tickets. I was looking at tickets for my Miami Hurricanes against Miami of Ohio for as low as $4 for tonight. Folks, forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. The flash sales are amazing. You want to download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On College for $20 off. You're going to find the best deals on this app. And guys, if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Use code Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
About last night, guys, as Kenton Gibbs of Locked On ACC joins us again. Drake Toll, Alex Dono, Kenton Gibbs. About last night, Utah and Florida. It was bad from the jump. It looked like Florida might be able to sneak in there late, and they just didn't. I think two things can be true. One, Florida's a really bad football team. Two, Utah is a really good football team. You saw that on display. Here's what our host of those two shows had to say about last night's game. All right, guys, we're going to take a pivot here and move out to Colorado. Let's go west here real quick before we get to that. Dono, you mentioned on it earlier. You touched on it earlier, Coach Prime and the Buffs. Kenton, Deion Sanders in college football at the FBS level now with Colorado. Dono said he goes 2-10 this season. What do you think about Coach Prime back in the South?
I mean, I don't see too much of a difference in what Dono is saying and what I believe is going to happen for this team. And I say that because you're turning over a ton of your roster from last year. And yes, most of the guys that you're turning over were a part of a 1 or 2 win team that wasn't very good, sure. Yeah. But also there's going to be some acclimation. There's going to be some adjustment time. However, I will say this. They do have a higher ceiling than most people believe. Most people believe their ceiling is about 4 games. I'll tell you this much. If Coach Deion Sanders can make something work out, if he can force that team to gel together quickly, and Dono's got the U behind him, he's a Miami guy, he knows better than anybody. If a team can gel in this short amount of time, when they have as much talent as they have, because let's just be honest, their talent stacked up against the rest of the Pac-12, it's not a huge discrepancy. It's not. It's just realistically, it's not. It's the question of can they come together and be special in a short matter of time? And also, how good is Shador against FBS opponents? That's the biggest question. If he's good, this team gels, they can get to a bowl game.
Let's all focus in on what Kenton Gibbs just said here, that Colorado can get to a bowl game in 2023. Kenton, I think Colorado loses by a lot of points and then some this weekend against a TCU team that won a college football playoff game last year. All eyes are on Fort Worth as one of the top 3 games this weekend as the Buffs head to Texas. Steven Simcox, Locked on Horned Frogs. Kevin Borba, Locked on Buffs, broke down the keys to victory for this rivalry game.
All right, Kevin, give me one or two. You talked about matchups. Give me just one or two keys for Colorado. If they win this game, how does it get done?
Yeah, I think the main key is protecting Shedeur Sanders. If this offense is going to go at all, they need him to have some time. It doesn't matter how athletic of a quarterback you are. It's hard to make plays when you're always running for your life. And then the other one, I think they need to pressure Chandler Morris. I think if they want to win this game, they need to make Chandler Morris uncomfortable and kind of make him go back to his, I guess, last year's debut when he was kind of struggling and overthrowing the ball and kind of just not looking like he was as advertised. What about you? What's the key for TCU?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say Sonny's talked a lot about how they're trying to just focus on themselves because of the challenge of preparing for this team. So, I mean, I think football 101, not turning the ball over, not committing stupid penalties, don't give up like a special teams touchdown, any sort of easy scores, easy plays for Colorado have to be, just a big no for the game. And then I think offensively, they're going to need to score. I feel like they can win this game comfortably, but with the unknown of Colorado's offense and team in general, I believe that's the side of the ball where they can exploit things more because, regardless of what they kind of do on defense, if TCU can get the ball in their playmakers' hands, hopefully they can make some plays. Okay, Kevin, moment of truth here. I'm sure nobody will remember this or hold us to it, but let's get our predictions for Saturday. What do you think happens?
So I think Colorado covers. I think the 20-point spread. There's just too many variables that have changed for both teams. And it's game 1, so nobody's going to be perfect. I'm also factoring that in. So I think Colorado covers. This has been a game that I've consistently said that I see TCU winning by a touchdown or 2. I think Colorado wins the Nebraska game, but that's not what this episode's about. I think TCU, like you alluded to it earlier, they just made it to the championship. They returned more. And obviously I think there's just kind of a different energy around them. I think Colorado, they're going to be answering a lot of questions as they go, is what it feels like. And I think this team will hit their stride eventually. I just feel like they have to work through some kinks. And I think that's kind of going to be the result of this game.
Yeah, I'm going to pick TCU as well. I mean, just straight up. The covering aspect is fascinating. I felt a lot more confident about them covering before I really dug into the Colorado roster this week. I think, I still have questions about Colorado being cohesive. But from a skill position standpoint, I feel like they're solid. And you talked about game 1. It's just really hard to play a perfect game in game 1. There's bound to be some mistakes. But I'll stick with my prediction. I think they end up covering, but I could see this being a close game in the first half.
Oh, wow, Dono, 2 of our more tame hosts. Nobody really wanted to win this game by a lot this weekend, I guess. You had to pry it out of Steven Simcox to say the Frogs are going to do well. Look, TCU's got Trey Sanders, running back from Alabama now. They've transferred in the number 1 JUCO guy in the secondary in the country. I don't see this game being close.
Well, there are certain areas I'm going to be looking at from the Colorado side, like their defensive backfield. You expect that, obviously, not only to be well coached by Deion Sanders, but they've got the talent there, looking at guys like Travis Hunter. And what is true freshman Cormani McClain going to do? Because it seems like he took some lumps, had some good moments and some bad in fall camp. So that's definitely an area on a Deion Sanders coach team I always watch.
Coming up on College Football Kickoff Live each week, we take a look at teams in the college football playoff conversation. We can start with Georgia, but we'll start with USC instead because they might not be around too long. That is next, Dono.
Well, folks, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Folks, I know this works because I have gotten jobs through LinkedIn Jobs before. You add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Then simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience. Then you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Playoffs. We're talking about playoffs on September 1st. Each week, a different host whose team has a real playoff chance will join this show and sell us on why their team should be in the national playoff conversation. We start with Mark Culkin from Locked On USC.
How you guys doing?
Mark. The
Let's
offense
see,
is
Mark.
good. The defense, I think all of us here have questions. Can you help us out?
Sure. What would you like to know about USC's defense?
Can it be good?
Yes, it can. Yes, it can. What USC's defense needs to do is, number one, settle in on who your starters are or who your backups are. In the first game against San Jose State, USC ran out over 70 players on defense. Not on defense, on the whole roster basically played. And that included pretty much everybody on defense. Their best player, Eric Gentry at linebacker, he's still not quite 100% yet. However, you did see a difference when he was on the field versus when he was not. USC struggles at times, I guess is the best way to put it, playing defense. Against San Jose State, when Eric Gentry got on the field, USC had 3 3-and-outs in a row. And then the next 2 or 3 series that he actually played in, they might have given up a first down before they had to get off the field. So a little bit of experimenting that we saw against San Jose State. And while, yes, people were anticipating a bigger jump, looking different than what they looked like last year, it's game 1. You rolled a lot of players out there. If we're still having the same conversation after games 3 and 4, hey, bring me back on and pick your best shot.
Kenton, let's go to you. What's your biggest concern with USC this season? And Mark, maybe you can try to help him out.
I'll tell you this. Baseball and football have one thing in common. You have to be strong up the middle in both sports. I am worried about USC up the middle at all 3 levels, honestly. I'm concerned, and I need to know, we've seen this story, we've seen this song and dance with Lincoln Riley before, of the offense is going to be hot as fish grease and the defense is going to be cold as the icebox where Omarion's heart used to be. Help me out. Tell me why this team's going to be strong up the middle at all 3 levels, or at least 2.
So one of the issues that USC dealt with last year in Lincoln Riley's first year was a lack of depth. They attacked the transfer portal probably as well as anybody did during the offseason. They brought in Bear Alexander from Georgia. They brought in an Anthony Lucas from Texas A&M. They brought in a Jack Sullivan from Purdue. They brought in Keon Bars from Arizona. Keon Bars and Bear Alexander are the 2 guys up the middle. Mason Cobb is the linebacker from Oklahoma State. These are the areas that they're trying to address where they showed significant weakness last year. So they put the Band-Aid over the middle. They brought in more players. They addressed their depth issue. And let's just be honest, folks. Last year, USC missed the playoffs by this much of a margin. And that was with 0 defense. They don't have to be great. They don't have to be really good. They just have to be average when you've got Caleb Williams and that type of offensive firepower that's going to keep you in every single game. Because if the other team can't score with USC, USC's defense just needs to do enough to carry them over the finish line.
Wow. I want to pause there and just explain. You just explained the thesis of Big 12 football for the last decade. Hey, our defense can suck as long as the offense scores. Mark, the adage is defense wins championships. So maybe that won't hold true for you and the Trojans. But Dono, what's the concern for you?
Well, no, I'm not even going to go with the concern. I'm going to go with the strength because I'm a glass half full guy, all right? You mentioned Caleb Williams, who obviously he's off to a nice start against San Jose State. 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, big yardage. Heisman darling, already penciled in as the first overall pick in this coming NFL draft. Could he be even better, Mark, than he was a season ago? What do you think the ceiling is for Williams in that O?
So the short answer is yes, he can be better, and that's kind of scary. He won the Heisman last year, and when he was there in New York with all the other quarterback candidates who were playing in the playoffs, that's what Caleb Williams wants. He wants the opportunity to play in a championship. He wants to win a championship. He hasn't done that yet in college. So that is his motivating factor. And again, when you see the growth, we talk about how freshmen grow from year 1 to year 2 when they become a sophomore. The same rule applies when a coach takes over the new team. You see growth from year 1 to year 2. And I think you're just going to see more of that of USC this year. To Drake's comment about defense wins championships, that is absolutely true. But you're seeing those teams that typically have great defenses, they're relying on their offenses now. Nick Saban has been very forthcoming with it. It's all about offense now. You saw what Georgia's offense did in the championship game last year. It wasn't really their defense that won the game.
Well, Mark, TCU did only score 7 points. So you can make a case in either direction for the Georgia offense or defense.
I was about to say that defense, I mean, they had TCU standing on their head for half the game. That was a tough one. That was a real tough one. So that may not be the best case of all time.
I also saw Georgia struggle with Kent State to start the season. So
and Missouri. Yeah, Missouri on the road.
Certain games, we can go that all day long.
Yeah. That's true.
Well, Mark, for now, your team is a college football playoff contender. And with the schedule in the Pac-12, that could still be standing within the next 10, 12 weeks when the season wraps up. Thanks for joining Locked On College Football Kickoff Live.
Look forward to it.
Guys, it is time for our newest, maybe my favorite segment of the show. It is Sell Me Why. We're going to go around the country here and sell you on spreads in college football. The number 12 Tennessee Volunteers host the Virginia Cavaliers. And I know what you're thinking, Power 5 game. The spread can't be that crazy. Well, at noon Eastern tomorrow, it's a 28.5-point spread. Here's Eric Kane of Locked On Vols to sell you why the Vols should cover 28.5.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Eric Kane, host of Locked On Vols. And this is why Tennessee can cover the 27.5-point spread against Virginia. First and foremost, it's pretty much going to be a home game. Game's in Nashville, Nissan Stadium, a neutral site game, but Big Orange is going to be everywhere. So you're already going to have that home field advantage, if you will. Secondly, Virginia, on paper, it's the opener, so truly you don't know. But on paper, it's not a very good football team. A lot of personnel changes on offense for sure. Tony Elliott's second year at the helm, but you got a new quarterback in Tyler Muskett. Tony Muskett. You've got 4 new starters on the offensive line. Your top 4 wide receivers left the program. So a lot of question marks there. Your best defensive player for Virginia, Chico Bennett Jr., is out. And I think Tennessee's really going to try to start this season off with a bang with a new starting quarterback, Joe Milton, who is going to take some shots down the field. And this defense is going to be a whole lot better. That is why I believe Tennessee has a great chance of covering the 27.5-point spread, because Josh Heupel's just going to continue to put the pedal to the metal here in the season opener. It's going to be the Joe Milton show. Tennessee's got the better run game. Tennessee is better at all 3 levels on defense and is better on special teams. So I think it's going to be a big Orange win, and Tennessee will cover the 27.5-point spread. Stay locked into Locked On Vols on Monday for complete reaction. Tennessee and Virginia in the season opener.
Book a 4-touchdown win for the Vols this weekend, guys. The Duke's Mayo Classic is tomorrow night. Number 21, North Carolina. The Tar Heels against Shane Beamer's South Carolina Gamecocks. The Tar Heels favored by 3 points, 2.5 at some books. Kenton, ACC guy. Is North Carolina top of the SEC in the Duke's Mayo Classic?
Thank God we got somebody that could put on a decent representation of the ACC, because, Lord, that first game, they don't have to sell me why. They don't got to sell me something good. They don't got to do none of that. That is going to be an absolute devastation. But in talking about this game with USC, UNC, who's the real Carolina per se, we're going to see a game that is going to be a lot like what we just talked about with USC's pundit, and I'm talking about Southern California here. It's going to be a track meet on turf. This is going to be a race to 50, whoever has the ball last type of game, because you look at UNC's defense, and they couldn't stop a runny nose with Robitussin tissue and 8 different COVID vaccines. And you look at South Carolina's defense, and they lost. The SEC is known for being big and physical and defensive linemen flying at you from everywhere. And lo and behold, that may be where they're emptiest. That especially their defensive end room, where they lost a ton of talent basically overnight. So you'll see Drake May and Spencer Rattler potentially have great games here. I'm not sure about the line. FanDuel, I don't know. But whatever the over is, go hammer that thing. Unless that over is 120, go hammer it right now.
Yeah, Dono, I am blown away by the South Carolina team with losses to Florida last year and Missouri, but wins against Tennessee and Clemson. They don't make any sense. And now with Spencer Rattler as a Heisman dark horse, who's had a weird journey in college football, I personally like the +2.5, +3 for South Carolina.
I think it's a great line. It kind of reminds you of an NFL line. Anytime you're talking about 2.5s or 3s, the LSU Florida State game is in a similar situation. I'm leaning ever so slightly to North Carolina to win the game and probably just cover, because 3 is usually the magic numbers with these things. Yep. I think Spencer Rattler's probably getting slept on a little bit too much, maybe not getting enough respect. I know that's been a topic of conversation in that side of the Carolinas, but I can tell you Drake May is more than likely going to be the best player on that field. And with 2 offenses, and, I know Drake May doesn't get a lot of defensive support, but in what's going to be an offensive-centric game, I'm going to go with the best overall player. And I think Drake May, as he's going to have to do a lot this year, is going to put the Tar Heels on his back and just edge it out with a win and probably just cover that 3 points. But I'm not even sure which way I'm going to go on that yet, Drake. I could make an argument for maybe this game gets decided by a point in either direction, or North Carolina squeaks by with a 3-point win.
With defenses turned off effectively, one thing I look at, Clayton White, when he got to South Carolina, this was a bottom 10 defense in the Power 5. In his first 2 seasons, they're now a top 40 defense. Not a massive jump, but in this game, I think it's enough where you're just not going to see a lot of that side of the ball. Now, playoff hopefuls Ohio State, they opened the season as 30-point favorites against the Indiana Hoosiers. 30-point favorites in a conference game. We had to Jay Stevens of Locked On Buckeyes to sell us why you should take the Buckeyes to cover.
Most of the time, the thought of a team covering a spread of 29.5, according to our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, you would think it won't happen. However, this is Ohio State versus Indiana. The Hoosiers are not the superior team. The Hoosiers do not have the superior talent. The Hoosiers do not have the better coaching. The Buckeyes are coming in motivated and seeking a season where they do not have the same outcome that they had a year ago. The quest to make sure that does not happen starts on Saturday. The Buckeyes week 1 starter at quarterback, Kyle McCord, and I do think he's going to do a phenomenal job of connecting with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka while he is out there on the field. Mayan Williams, Trevion Henderson, I don't think the Hoosiers can slow down the Buckeyes' rushing attack, as those 2 guys are looking to make multiple trips to pay dirt. The defense, I think that'll be an elite unit as well. Buckeyes covering the spread of 29.5 against Indiana on Saturday, it can happen.
All right. If that's what you want to cash in at FanDuel, be my guest, but I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. What I will do is head up to Fort Worth, where Deion Sanders is taking on TCU, number 17 Horned Frogs, at a 20.5-point spread at FanDuel. Kenton, I am all over Sonny Dykes and Chandler Morris this weekend.
And here's the very interesting thing that I find about this TCU squad. Everybody's like, "Oh, you lost to Riley, brother. That offense is going to suffer." And I'm asking people, does anybody know who Sonny Dykes is? Like, what is happening here? Did we forget? Sonny Dykes' problem has never been putting up points. That has never been a thought of, hey, will this team score a lot? So with that being said, this team is going to score. They're going to do what they do. I mean, Travis Hunter for Colorado is great. He's amazing. He can only cover one guy at a time. He's only going to be covering one zone at a time. There will be some Colorado defenders looking at the back of Horned Frog heads as if they're good barbers. That's just how this game is going to work out. I believe that TCU is going to cover this spread. They say good teams good teams win and great teams cover. But in this reality, it's a good team that's probably playing against a team that's going to be a little outclassed here.
Absolutely. And look, it's a TCU team that FanDuel right now, the disrespect 7.5 win total for this TCU team. They certainly beat that out this year with Chandler Morris, who won the job over Max Duggan. Let people forget, this guy was the starting quarterback at TCU until he got hurt in this Colorado game last year. That was a blowout. Dono, the only difference to me in this game from what it was last season is that Colorado has 73 new players. It was already bad last year. I just don't see it being close.
When I saw this line at FanDuel, I started salivating, and I'm pretty conservative with this stuff. When we're talking about 27.5 point spreads, 28 point. I know this isn't that, but when you talk about these giant spreads week one between two Power 5 teams, I'm usually either staying away from it or I'm taking the underdog to cover that big spread. Not in this case, okay? Because again, I know the Colorado fans already hate me for starting the show saying they're not going to win more than 2 games this year. I think that during the season, they're going to start to figure some things out and maybe cover some big spreads like this. But it's not going to happen against TCU week one, right? Gelling, finding that cohesion, first game with 80-plus new scholarship players against a team that just played for a national title last year and won a college football playoff game. I think TCU is going to run them out of the building, and I can feel pretty comfortable taking TCU minus 20.5 this time.
Now, on Monday night, the number 9 ranked Clemson Tigers head to Durham to open the year against the Duke Blue Devils, and somehow our mighty Clemson, who sells deals in God's name, image, and likeness, only 12.5 point favorites at FanDuel against the Duke Blue Devils. The Tigers, less than 2 touchdown favorites. Here's Damian Parson to tell you why Clemson should cover the spread.
The Clemson Tigers are a 12.5 point favorite Monday night when they walk into Wallace Wade Stadium versus the Duke Blue Devils. And I think that they can cover this spread. The reason why, defensively, when you have a defense with as many NFL draft prospects as the Clemson Tigers on the defensive line, the second level with the linebackers, and then look into the secondary, you have players at all 3 levels to make the plays necessary to hold a potential high-octane offense, a diversified and versatile offense that the Duke Blue Devils have with dual-threat quarterback Riley Leonard and Jalen Calhoun, Jordan Moore at those 2 wide receivers. I think when you factor in a new starting right tackle who's never played tackle in college football, starting for the Duke Blue Devils, I think that gives Xavier Thomas an opportunity to get into the backfield and create chaos. Rook Ororo, Tyler Davis, Justin Maskell, Barrett Carter, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., those guys will make the impact, and that's why I think that they will cover the spread.
If Clemson doesn't cover 12.5, I'll saw off my left pinky toe with a rusted knife. What are we talking about here? It's the Duke Blue Devils. Absolutely. FanDuel 12.5. I'm all over that one. Now, Kenton, since we got you here, Dono gave his season prediction earlier, his big one, that Colorado goes 2-10. You look across the landscape of the college game. What do you like? What's your one big prediction for this year?
First of all, get that rusted knife ready. It's possible. This is not your dad's Duke football, but we'll talk about that later. My big prediction for this season is that Notre Dame gets closer to a national championship than Georgia this year. Wow. Notre Dame gets closer to a national championship than Georgia. I know that people are going to look at me crazy, but there are 3 reasons that I say this. Number 1, no team has three-peated since Minnesota, and Betty White was in grade school at that time.
Yeah.
Let's start there. Number 2, I know that everybody's lambasting how easy Georgia's schedule looks and all that. Look at Notre Dame's schedule. Look at it in depth. The only teams that you would say are in the same stratosphere as them is Ohio State, who has problems at tackle and quarterback, 2 positions you absolutely don't want to have questions about. Not problems, they have questions there. And then you look at USC, defense is optional. And you got Sam Hartman over there. Listen, that team is primed and ready. Now, will they get destroyed by 50 in the playoff? Very possibly. But this is a team that is primed for an 11-1 or undefeated season.
It's Notre Dame for Kenton Gibbs this season. And coming up next, let's talk Arizona State Sun Devils. They have done one of the stupidest things that you could possibly do in college football. That is up next. But first, Dono.
Folks, let's get ready for some NFL action with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I've been having so much fun even during the offseason on FanDuel, and now it's go time because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now, that's a great deal, guys. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can bet on everything from the spreads to player props and more. The parlays are fantastic. So you need to visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
I think the word joke encapsulates everything that has come out of Arizona State the last couple of weeks, and this one is maybe my favorite. After Herm Edwards committed recruiting violations by bringing recruits on campus during a dead period because of COVID-19, the Sun Devils have self-imposed a bowl ban. So instead of firing Edwards for cause in the investigation, they gave him a $4.4 million buyout and then gave themselves a self-imposed bowl ban. Now the punishment lands on new head coach Kenny Dillingham. Locked On Sun Devils host Richie Bradshaw is not happy with Ray Anderson. I don't know if anybody with half a brain is. At the vice president of athletics for Arizona State, Ray Anderson certainly deserves all of this that he gets from our host, Richie Bradshaw.
So, and it's crazy when you think about this, Drake. Some of these recruiting rules, I get it, are real complicated in the age of technology and, the data limitations and stuff on texting and phone calls. But, I mean, it seems to me like the biggest no-brainer in the world is dead period. Everybody knows when and what the dead period is. So you're not bringing players on campus. And then, like you said, the punishment gets passed on to Dillingham and to the players who are currently there. That, to me, I could complain for 6 hours about the NCAA and their archaic codes of conduct, but one of the things that annoys me more than anything else is when head coach X commits a violation and then he gets out of Dodge, and it's the people who remain are the ones who are left to pick up the pieces. I absolutely hate that.
Yeah. 100%. And I before we move past this, I just want to say this. This is one of those moments, and like you talked about, Dono, the way in which the NCAA works, this is one of those moments that we'll look at as one of those dominoes that triggered the NCAA football becoming a separate entity from the NCAA altogether. Because let's just be honest, all the conference movement and consolidation we're seeing, the Power 5 becoming the Power 4 and all that, we know where this is headed. We're slowly marching on towards football saying, hey, we're going to govern ourselves. You all figure that out with the rest of it. But I digress. It's a terrible situation for Arizona State to be in on behalf of folks who, like you said, are no longer in the program.
I'm going to self-impose myself. I can't win the lottery this week. I think Vanderbilt, maybe Northwestern. Like this is similar to me from what Michigan did in suspending Jim Harbaugh for the Western Kentucky or Western Michigan game, right? He got a 3-game suspension and none of them matter. You have a joke of a reaction when you take a team that's going to win 3 games this year and say, you know what? No matter what happens, we're not going to a bowl. You aren't going to a bowl anyway. This whole thing is laughable to me. And this is the same Ray Anderson that as soon as Arizona State got the invite to the Big 12, came out publicly and said, sure, we'll go to the Big 12. I'm not going to Morgantown. The first thing he did when he got on the lifeboat, right? Titanic's going down, and we pulled him out of the water onto the lifeboat. He looked at the driver and said, you're fat. And looked at everybody else and said, you're all ugly. I'm done. What a joke of a program right now at Arizona State. The leadership there has only made that school look worse. Again, the big issue I have with this, Kenton, maybe the biggest issue, they weren't going to a bowl in the first place.
Yeah. And I'm all for teams holding themselves accountable and, saying, hey, we're going to be serious about these things. And trust me, as an NC State graduate, I've seen NC State self-impose postseason penalties when it's like, the basketball team probably wasn't going to the tournament this year anyway, but good on you. I'll say this. I understand trying to preempt the NCAA and say like, hey, we did it to ourselves, so you can't punish us anymore. The only problem with that is, like you said, this is a team that is going to be terrible. Like at the end of the day, by game 5 or 6, we'll already be like, oh yeah, this team is basically eliminated from bowl contention already. Huh? That's tough. Well, it's an unfortunate situation. And, the players who have been on record talking about it have all said, we're going to keep grinding and chipping away like we were going to do anyway. And like Donald said, at the end of the day, you can tell that those players are looking around like, we didn't bring on anybody who wasn't supposed to be here. We understand that dead period means dead. That's Herm Edwards, who's probably back at ESPN being the talking head already. Yeah. Like, let's knock this off. So, it's an unfortunate situation. But like you said, I am banning myself from dating Meg Thee Stallion this week for not being on time to the show today. I'm banning myself from dating Meg Thee Stallion.
That's her loss, not yours.
I'm sorry, Meg. I'm sorry. I know. I'm announcing this live. So everybody's spotting this out at the same time, including Meg. Meg, I'm sorry. Next week, I'll be back. I can't do it. I can't.
Oh, dude. Hey, look, if you're out there and you're wondering, who are these 3 guys, the 3 talking heads on your screen right now? Welcome to Locked On College Football Kickoff. It's a live show every Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern. That's Kenton Gibbs of Locked On ACC, Alex Dono of Locked On Canes, Drake Toll here from Locked On Big 12. Dono, college football is back. There are storylines to look out for this weekend, the big one being expansion. Let's hit on that a little bit here because the ACC has now added 3 new teams out west.
Yeah. The ones very, very far out west are the ones that are going to give me headaches and nightmares. I mean, this is a desperate move by a desperate conference. And in the case of Cal and Stanford, they had a lot more to gain from this than the ACC did, because you're talking about your travel costs and logistics, because this is about more than just football, right? It's not just football teams and basketball teams who have to travel back and forth, golf teams, tennis teams, everybody has to make these trips from Northern California to the East Coast, all the way down to South Florida in my case. And, there's a reason why when the Big 10 and the Big 12 were poaching the Pac-12, why these are teams they left behind. They didn't want Cal and Stanford for a reason. Obviously, they moved the needle academically, but they do not move the needle right now athletically. Now, in the case of adding SMU, I'm kind of intrigued by that. I'm curious to hear Kenton's take on this one as well, because, Texas and Dallas is not that far away, given the geographic landscape of the Power 5 conferences these days. It's not that crazy to add a team from Texas. I'm sure, every team in the ACC wouldn't mind having more of a recruiting presence in that part of the country.
Yeah, so let me say this. If you have watched me on Locked On Wolfpack or Locked On ACC talk about expansion, I have constantly said one thing. I'm completely neutral on expansion until there was an announcement by somebody from the San Francisco Chronicle saying that this expansion could potentially be for only the revenue-generating sports. Then I was all on board for it, and let me tell you why. Because those are the sports that use the private jet. Those are the sports that you don't really have to worry about them having to play multiple games or having a meet that lasts multiple days and then having to go back to school afterwards. That's not the case of what's happened, which sends me back to neutrality in terms of, yes, there is additional money to be had, but the logistics are a nightmare. And student athletes who didn't sign up for this, student athletes who know, for example, let's say swimming, unless you're one of the greatest top 5 swimmers of all time, not in the nation right now. If you're not a top 5 swimmer of all time, you're not going to make enough money for that to be your career, to where this is what I do. I'm done. I do nothing besides swim. If you're not a Michael Phelps or a Lochte or something like that, Cullen Jones, if you're not that, you're going to have to work at some point in time in the real world, as we call it. And so being a detriment to their academics is absolutely ridiculous to me, because they take advantage of the networking events, of the ability to kind of expand their network via athletics in ways that they absolutely need to, because again, Caleb Williams in his first contract is going to be very different from somebody who's trying out at Olympic trials for the 100 backstroke. It's a different ball game. So with that being said, I look at this and say, hey, SMU ain't taking money for 9 years. Great. Sure. We love it. If they're great, they'll bring the Dallas market out in whole if they, have a year or two where they turn out to be special. But the reality is we have just done a grand disservice to student athlete health and welfare and academically as well, potentially, with this move. And so the money is great and sure, and I'm sure all of the teams who wanted more money will be happy now, or maybe they won't. Maybe they'll still complain and moan.
I think they'll still complain.
Yeah.
So and now so basically you've added these teams, added in a little bit of money. Teams are still going to complain and want to get out. It's a tough situation. It's really unfortunate.
Kenton, when I ordered this Big 12 flag behind me, they accidentally sent 2. So I'm going to mail you one, and you can join me as the co-host of Locked On Big 12 when Locked On ACC goes away. Look, Florida State pushes the needle. Florida State pushes the needle. Miami, Clemson, when those teams leave, when this contract is reworked, I don't see a world where the ACC exists in 2030 because the big brands already want out.
Yeah.
Is there still a Locked On ACC 5 years from now?
So here's the thing, right? We'll be covering a conference championship game of ODU versus NC State, and we'll love it. We'll love it, okay? The Monarchs versus the Wolfpack. Let's do it, baby. Yeah, we'll be there for it. No, but in all seriousness, I mean, you're right. I've said this for a long time, and I've said it earlier in this show. We are headed towards a consolidation of powers. Yeah. What we are headed towards is basically a AFC, NFC style thing in college football. And guess what happens when that consolidation happens? Hey, I think that you owe our teams about $80 million a year. No, we're not going to pay that. Well, great. I talked to those guys, and they said they want $85 million over there. So good luck trying to get any football on your TV outside of UAB and Troy. Good for you. Go for it, buddy. And I think that's where we're ultimately headed towards. So will the ACC exist as it stands now in 5 to 10 years? Probably not. But I think college football as a whole will look extremely different from a conference standpoint in a decade or so.
Yeah. Kenton, as we dive back into games this weekend, look, I don't think we have any college football hopefuls in this rivalry. Maybe there's a big surprise. These two teams feel like the chaos teams that upset somebody along the way. But I tell you, one player holds a ton of expectations. Andrew Lyons, Locked On Gamecocks, explains to Isaac Shade of Locked On Tar Heels why Game 1 holds a ton of weight for South Carolina QB Spencer Rattler.
There's been a lot of discussion over the past month, and especially throughout this offseason, from circles inside of that building that have been saying that, hey, Spencer Rattler looks like he's taken a step forward. It looks like that this offense being more catered to his skill set and his strengths, it is unlocking a new level for him right now. And I don't want to be disrespectful when I make this comment, but if you're going to have a defense,
okay, say it.
Where
Just
Spencer Rattler, if you're going to have a defense or be faced with a defense that's going to give you an opportunity to showcase all of the steps that you've taken this offseason, it is North Carolina's defense. North Carolina's defense has just kind of fallen off a cliff the last couple years. Gene Chizik comes in his first year in 2022, and things somehow seem to get a little bit worse in certain areas. So still got question marks regarding that. So if you're Spencer Rattler, you're facing a North Carolina defensive backfield that has a ton of new starters, a lot of new faces, guys from the transfer portal. Some of them might be pretty good. And the Tar Heels do have an advantage in the sense that they don't have any film on these guys playing together, but they also have a disadvantage in the sense that these guys have never played together in a game. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there with North Carolina's secondary. So for Spencer Rattler, Antoine Juice Wells is going to play in this game. Shane Beamer said on Tuesday that he is 100% good to go. You're going to have Xavier Legette, another guy that is a fifth-year senior, I believe, has taken another step forward, ready to make an impact. Amarian Brown. You got Trey Knox and Joshua Simon at tight end. You've got a lot of pieces there at your disposal. So Spencer Rattler on Saturday night, you need to go out there and you need to play up to the best of your abilities. You need to showcase that, again, you've made progression this offseason. If South Carolina even wins this game, but Spencer Rattler does not have a bunch of chunk plays, there's not a bunch of explosive plays through the air. In all honesty, Isaac, I feel like the Gamecock fans will walk away a little bit disappointed because they've heard so much about just how well he has been doing in practice, how good this offense has looked at times. So if you can't get it done against a North Carolina secondary that for the past couple of years has been pretty lackluster, then admittedly, it'd be fair to raise concerns about what you're going to do against other teams. Teams like, obviously, a Georgia, a team like Kentucky with a great defense, a team in Clemson that wants revenge and has good athletes on the back end. You're going to face much better secondaries this year. So go out there and send the message in week 1 that you are not the Spencer Rattler, again, that people saw for the majority of this past fall. You're a new Spencer Rattler. You're the Spencer Rattler that we all thought you could be when you went to Oklahoma at the start of your college career.
You know, what's so interesting about that, Andrew, I love this take from you because for North Carolina, the strength of the defense is the linebacking core. You've got Cedric Gray, who's a preseason second-team AP All-American. You've got Power Eccles, who's right there with them. And so it's like the middle of the defense for Carolina, I feel comfortable with. And in terms of the secondary, we talked about the offensive line. The defensive line for North Carolina has not, you know, it's like, hey, opposing quarterback, how do you want to treat this tonight? You want to just have space to run around? Cool, we'll give you that, right? And so, like, it's about North Carolina's defensive line having to find a way to go make life uncomfortable for Spencer Rattler. They haven't proven, as you're kind of alluding to, that they can do that. Their ability to do that, I think, also plays into what you're talking about there with Spencer Rattler versus the secondary. If the secondary is going to have the time, you know, if they're going to have to be guarding for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds at a time, giving Rattler all the time he needs because the line can't get to him, congrats, you know? And so I'm really curious to see what the line can do with guys like Kamen Rucker and Des Evans trying to get to the ball.
Alex Dono, $100 will win you $5,000 at FanDuel if you put it on Spencer Rattler to win the Heisman and he goes to New York and takes the trophy. Are you just throwing away money if you do it?
No, I think that's probably the same sort of calculated risk as buying a scratch-off ticket or buying a Powerball ticket, where it's like, I'm not investing a whole lot. I think Rattler can be in that conversation. Now, if he doesn't carve up the North Carolina secondary this week, there's going to be a good indication we're not going to see him at the Heisman Trophy ceremony. But listen, I mentioned it, Drake, earlier, and I'll double down on it. I think people are probably sleeping on Spencer Rattler a little bit too much because he does have a better resume, I think, than people realize. I know the way things went down with Oklahoma's quarterback situation a couple of years ago left people underwhelmed, but he's a career so far 58 touchdown to 24 interception passer. That's a good ratio. This guy can get an offense going. So I'm buying that lottery ticket. Am I predicting Spencer Rattler to win the Heisman Trophy? Absolutely not. Is it worth taking a little gamble on that on FanDuel? I think it is.
Yeah, Kenton, obviously South Carolina is going to win the stupid games on the schedule, the Furmans that every SEC, the Jacksonville States that every SEC team loves to play. But I also think they might sneak up on a Texas A&M, on a Clemson again. They get Georgia and Tennessee. I don't think this is a very good team, but they at least make things interesting.
I do agree that they make things interesting. And again, I'm very concerned about South Carolina's defensive front. Anytime you find yourself saying you're concerned about an SEC team's defensive front, you're not looking at a great situation. However, they could be a track meet on turf type team. Now, that doesn't work out in the SEC because you're going to run into one or two defenses where that just ain't going to get it done. So you're going to have to put your hand in there, put on your big boy britches and stop somebody. That's just the reality. But we're not talking about Spencer Rattler going to the playoffs. We're not talking about South Carolina going to the playoffs. We're not talking about Beamer coaching these guys up to go 15-0. We're talking about, could Spencer get to New York? Absolutely. There's definitely a chance that happens. And I'm going to tell you, there's one guy actually two guys that are kind of unproven commodities, kind of household names to South Carolina. They're big to them that everybody in the country will probably know by the end of the year, especially if Spencer gets to New York. Nick Harbor, also known as Nichols Harbor, and DeCarrion Joyner. Let me tell you something. Those two Nick Harbor is a freak of nature. 6'5", 240, runs like, I want to say, what was it, a 10.9 or 10.6 or something like that in the 100? Insane. Like, think of Calvin Johnson in the NFL in college. Like, that's the type of athlete that you're looking at there. And Joyner, he does it all. The man is the modern-day Cordell Stewart. He's played quarterback, running back, receiver. You name it, he's lined up somewhere on that offensive side of the ball as a skill position for South Carolina. If he can lock in on one position and truly lock down his playmaking abilities to just that receiver position and complement Juice Wells, this could be a special year for Spencer.
reminds me of like a Robert Griffin III, how that team, I think they won the Alamo Bowl at Baylor.
Yep.
It wasn't a national contender, but the guy lit up the stat sheet so much that you couldn't go without giving him the trophy. That's how Spencer Rattler could backdoor his way to New York this season.
And remember, a lot like RG3, Baylor did what the year that they won Heisman? They beat Texas for the first time in like so long. South Carolina could beat Clemson back to back for the first time in however long, and that would be the narrative. That would be hey, Spencer's in this team. May not have been great, but they won the Palmetto Bowl. You say what you want about them. They beat one of the best teams in the nation with that.
Yeah. That's Alex Dono, Locked On Canes. Kenton Gibbs, Locked On ACC. Drake Toll here from Locked On Big 12. This is Locked On College Football Kickoff live every Friday, 11 to 1 as we roll through the 12 o'clock hour here, guys. Coming up next is Conference Confidential. We'll take you to the Big 12, the SEC, HBCU as well. But first, Dono.
Guys, Game Time is the place for last-minute ticket deals. I know that can be a stressful experience. You're on some of these websites and you're not sure if you're getting a good deal. You're always getting the best deal at Game Time, and they're going to guarantee it. They've got flash deals and last-minute tickets. I've seen some pretty big teams playing this weekend. You can get tickets for under $10, guys. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Those flash deals on football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more are absolutely amazing. And folks, the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
All right, fellas, let's take it around the country with another Conference Confidential. Which games, which players, what's the most important this weekend that you should keep an eye on? We look at the SEC, HBCU, and it's me. Oh, that's me in a BYU shirt. Hey, me, take it away. Hey, thanks, me. What a great haircut, man. You're looking good today. Look, the Big 12 this weekend, there is one game, TCU in Colorado, and I struggle to call it a game because it's not going to be a game. I liken it to this. Last year's national championship game, my front right tire 3 weeks ago on I-35 and TCU Colorado, all blowouts. There's no way this thing is close. Colorado has, 70-plus brand new players. Deion Sanders, awesome guy, great spirit. He's going to be a figurehead in the Big 12. Not going to win a lot of football games this year in Boulder. TCU wins 42-21. Chandler Morris lights it up. They got transfers from Bama and Oklahoma State, and you name it, TCU probably has a transfer from there. They're going to be good this season. They are underrated in the Big 12. Around the rest of the conference, there's nothing I look at and say, hey, this is must-see TV. West Virginia and Penn State. West Virginia, I love you, but I know Neil Brown's going to get fired. He's like weekend at Bernie's. We're just kind of propping him up and wait until his buyout's a little bit less. 20.5 the spread on that game. Penn State at home on a whiteout at night. It's going to be bad. Brutally, brutally bad. Another game that I might be vaguely interested in, Baylor, Texas State. I talked to Dave Aranda this week, talked to Texas State head coach G.J. Kinney. I believe Texas State covers 28 in this, and it's a lot closer than people expect. Kinney wins wherever he goes. I don't know if Dave Aranda's team with Blake Shapen gets a hot start out of the chute. And then UTSA Houston. It might not jump off the page to you. UTSA favored on the road. Houston unveiling new uniforms. It's going to be rocking. UTSA is a better team. They're a better team than the Big 12's, one of the Big 12's newest members in Houston. However, the Cougars at home get an upset victory. They take it. Very casual week in the Big 12. At least it should be.
I'm Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Locked On HBCU host, and this is what you need to watch this weekend in the HBCU landscape. We have a monumental game and a potential SWAC East divisional championship game in week 1 between FAMU and Jackson State. This has been the game that has decided it over the last 2 seasons, and this appears to be the 2 best teams within that division for the 3rd year in a row. So you have Jeremy Musa, the SWAC preseason offensive player of the year. You have Jason Brown, who just set a SWAC MEAC challenge record for most passing yards, and they'll be facing off. But this isn't the only quarterback battle to watch this week. You have Southern University versus Alabama State. And what fascinates me about this is Harold Blood for Southern and D. Davis for Alabama State both have a lot to prove. Now, D. Davis is fighting for his job. Many people think he should have been replaced by Damon Stewart, but he's going up against a talented Southern secondary, and this is the perfect opportunity to prove that he is the guy. Same with Harold Blood, who was just named the quarterback. Alabama State has their own talented secondary. So both quarterbacks are going against really good secondaries, and both quarterbacks have something to prove. Now, for more on all things HBCU, you can check out Locked On HBCU every single day, Monday through Friday, your team every day.
Chris Gordy here of the Locked On SEC podcast, coming to you from Orlando, Florida, the site of the biggest college football game of the weekend. That's LSU versus Florida State, a battle of 2 top 10 teams. Brian Kelly and company came up short a year ago. They're hoping to get the Seminoles this time around, and they have a loaded roster with Jaden Daniels back at quarterback. He is a Heisman contender, going up against another Heisman contender in Jordan Travis on Florida State side. But looking around the rest of the SEC, there's some big games as well. South Carolina taking on North Carolina. Drake May, the quarterback at UNC, getting a lot of hype that he might be a top 5 draft pick next year. But a chance for Spencer Rattler to make some noise and Shane Beamer to get another marquee win on his resume early on. Around the rest of the conference, it's all about quarterbacks. It's new quarterbacks in places like Tennessee, where Joe Milton will be taking on Virginia. Devin Leary over Kentucky. They'll get Ball State, but how does Devin Leary look in his first time with the Wildcats? And then, of course, the 2 picks to win the SEC this year, Alabama and Georgia, both replacing quarterbacks with Stetson Bennett and Bryce Young now in the NFL. What's it going to look like with Alabama? We hear Jalen Milroe might be the guy. Let's see how he looks against Middle Tennessee. And for Georgia, of course, they're just trying to get themselves right. They have about a dozen guys that are banged up right now. We'll see how healthy they can be in this game, but expect big things out of Carson Beck. He's my dark horse Heisman contender. We'll see what the SEC does. Not off to the greatest start so far with Florida losing to Utah, but let's see if they can make it a good week 1 in the SEC.
Wow, Gordy at Epcot and filming it on his Apple Watch. What a guy, multi-talented. And he picks Carson Beck to win the Heisman Trophy, a dark horse. Dono, no chance in hell.
Well, first of all, it's nice that I am no longer the only person on the Locked On Network who has filmed content for the channel at Epcot, because I have done that before. And now Gordy joins that exclusive club. But you know what, Drake? I don't think the Carson Beck shout out is crazy, because listen, man, I know the Heisman is an individual award, but let's not pretend supporting cast don't have a lot to do with that. And Georgia is absolutely stacked at every position on both sides of the football. So Carson Beck for Heisman, it may not be that crazy. And I got to tell you, man, if we're talking Heisman dark horses, and Kenton might think I'm crazy for this one, or he might agree, I don't know, but I'm not sleeping on Cade Klubnik at Clemson either, because again, I think he has shown some signs situationally. I don't think he was put in the best situations a season ago. He's got a really good supporting cast with the Clemson Tigers. So there's some other players I'm looking at that can get into that conversation in New York.
Kenton, I saw an article today from a Georgia source that said Carson Beck could have been our starting quarterback the entire time. And I just the hype at Georgia, is it founded?
I'll tell you this. Okay, like Dono said, the supporting cast is going to be there. They're going to be phenomenal. They're going to be great. They're going to make Carson Beck look like Stetson Bennett on steroids. He'll look amazing. We saw what Stetson Bennett looked like when he wasn't surrounded by the best players on the field in the NFL here in the preseason. We saw it. We saw it with both 2 eyes. In the words of Tyler Perry, we synced it. We synced it. Didn't look great. So Carson Beck, is the hype warranted around him? I don't feel comfortable one way or another castigating a judgment on this young man, but I will say, if he is as good as the hype warrants, then yeah, let's go ahead and hand him the Heisman now, because that means that my prediction about Notre Dame being closer to a national championship than Georgia will be incredibly wrong, and they're going to be the first team to three-peat in nearly a century. But with that being said, I think that the guy who our correspondent there was there to watch is actually the guy that's going to take it home in Jaden Daniels. You look at LSU, there seems to be a trend with them. They win 10 games, and then the next year, what happens? Undefeated national champs. That's what happened last time they won 10 games with a transfer quarterback who didn't look necessarily great in the first year. This could be his year to show everybody like, hey, I'm every bit as good as y'all thought, plus some. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that is the guy at the SEC that brings home the hardwood.
Yeah. Coming up later in the show, Auburn, a new head football coach. The Hugh Freeze era begins. We also talk about the best bets. If you love making money, your boy Q has got some free money at FanDuel this weekend. But first, a very one-sided rivalry in quotes, between Duke and Clemson. But this season, apparently everybody thinks there's a ton of uncertainty with this game and Clemson and them being in the national picture or out of it. And maybe J.J. Jackson of Locked On Blue Devils and Dame Parsons can help us put it all together. Parsons of Locked On Clemson. They got together this week to preview the game, talk about the direction under center for the Clemson Tigers.
What in the world's happening at the quarterback spot? You go from Deshaun Watson, followed by Trevor Lawrence. Their quarterback is always in the eyes of the entire country. We're really excited as college football fans for what DJ Uiagalelei could do. And then next thing you know, we've got a young Cade Klubnik who takes over and really catches people by storm as he gets set for like the first full season where it's his football team. He's the guy at quarterback. How important is that for Clemson's success, and what makes him the right guy for this job, Damian?
Man, it's very important. And you know, for DJU, just the offense and things that he did, it just it never got off the ground, right? Like the plane never left the airport for him. You know, they got up a little bit, but they kept coming right back down to surface level. So it's big to have, just continuity, that you know that this is their starting quarterback, right? And a lot of people kind of felt like DJU was going to be on the short leash and everything, that Cade was going to come in games, and he did. And that's not really a healthy relationship at all at the quarterback position, right? You want whoever's your guy to know that, hey, no matter win, lose, or draw, I'm your guy. So Cade knows he's the guy. And what makes him ready for it, everything, talking to his teammates, the work ethic. You know, he works his butt off. They talked about how he looks stronger. He looks more filled in to his frame. How even back in, I think it was January when Garrett Riley announced, when the announcement was made that he was coming to Death Valley, and everything like that, what he did was he made sure he wanted to learn the offense, create a relationship and build a relationship with his offensive coordinator. And that was 6-7 months ago. So having that type of mindset, that attitude, that maturity, right? And just talking about how he has the pulse of this offense down packed, where this young man is ready to go. He's a leader for these guys as well. So he already, and then he's a dual threat athlete. At the quarterback position, he has a track background. I think it was 200 4x4 and everything like that. Like, this young man can roll with his legs and being able to make plays, trust his offensive line. So, and this offensive line is very amped to get going. I've talked to some of them. They're really amped. They're really ready to go. So that's what makes Cade is ready for this job and ready for this role. Is just simple, man. He's putting in the work and he's ready to go.
That's a sneaky big game coming up on Monday night. It really gets a slot of its own for college football fans to gather around Clemson and Duke. I told you coming up, we're going to talk Auburn. We're going to talk the biggest storylines with the Blackerby Blitz in college football in a 5-minute, fast-paced reaction to everything going on across the game, as well as best bets this weekend. But first, Dono.
LinkedIn Jobs, my friends. If you're a small business owner, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. And folks, I know it works. I have gotten jobs through LinkedIn Jobs. I know small business owners who have filled vacancies. You add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile, and spread that word that you're hiring. People will see it. And then simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. And that's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
We are mowing through the 12 o'clock hour here, and the biggest game of the weekend. We've already talked to Caroline Fenton of Locked On LSU. Now, how about Locked On Seminoles? It's Brian Smith joining the show live. Brian, you get the biggest game. You get the spotlight this week on Sunday, and Caroline Fenton, the LSU host, already picked your Noles to win the game. Do you agree?
I do, and we probably agree for the same reason, and that's Mason Smith not playing, and LSU's corners, we're not sure. They moved a safety to corner a week or so before the game. That makes me nervous for any team. It doesn't have to be Florida State, LSU, or anybody. That's not good right before a season opener. So there's a pretty good wide receiver corps in Tallahassee that's going to be coming down to Orlando for that game. I'm not saying they don't have talent, but when you don't have chemistry at corner, even one bust could be the reason the team loses a game. It happens all the time.
And Brian, exactly what you're saying there is why my logic tells me LSU can and probably should win this game, but my gut is telling me Florida State's going to pull it off, because when you're talking about Johnny Wilson at 6'7" in that receiving core, Keon Coleman was a huge addition in the transfer portal, and Jordan Travis, that's another one. We've talked about a bunch of Heisman hopefuls already on this episode. That's another one that people are looking at in Jordan Travis at FSU. So how do you see that matchup playing out? And do you think that Florida State's passing game versus LSU secondary, is that the key to this game?
I think it's the second key, but I still think, like, for both teams, the team that can run the football on the interior and bring up the safeties, that never really changes at any level of football. There's a certain guy on this panel that played a little D-line in his day, and I'm sure that he didn't like it when the other team could run the ball, because then you can't just tee off and rush the pass. It's not rocket science. You can do two things. You can run or you can pass. If you're only a one-dimensional team, the D linemen eat. So the team that runs the ball on the interior, and both offensive lines are tremendous for both squads. There's some NFL ball players there. Will probably have an advantage, but at the same time, again, LSU secondary is a little more vulnerable, at least on paper. So again, I think there will be at least one play. Wilson is the most likely. He's listed at 237 pounds by their depth chart, by the way. That's incredible for a quote-unquote wide receiver. There are tight ends, flex tight ends listed at less. I mean, that literally. So it's pretty interesting. I think they're going to take shots to him in the red zone. They're going to probably a flea flicker, a rollout, whatever. He's going to get a few vertical opportunities.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, Brian. And I'm not wearing maroon to root for Florida State here. We just happen to have on the same color, brother. But
I see.
You're absolutely right about the stop the run and have some fun mentality that all of us defensive linemen have. But I want to talk about one thing that I think is very interesting in this game. Last year, Jared Verse had his breakout game here. He made his money in this game against one of the better offensive lines in the nation. Do you think that LSU will be looking for some revenge up front at least and saying, we're not going to get manhandled like we did last year? Because that 5, he wasn't just a problem. He was the problem for LSU all night.
Well, two things there. Number one, he is a dude. There's no question. How he ended up at Albany out of high school, I have no idea. But that's where he was before he transferred to the Noles. Second, both of FSU's offensive tackles were true freshmen last year. Yeah. I don't care what level you're playing at. True freshman and offensive tackle, again, that's Nervousville. I'm sure when you saw offensive lineman depth charts when you were at NC State and you saw a freshman, what did you say?
Oh, well, look at my chops. We're going to have some fun. We're going to have some fun here. This is going to be good.
But both those guys are sophomores and have physical traits that translate to the National Football League. I'm sure they're going to chip him. I'm sure they're going to do different things. But also, Florida State is inevitably going to move him around. He's not going to just line up at the same spot, do the same thing. Special players do special things. Harold Perkins will move around for LSU, too. He's another guy that, he's going to eat some tonight. He's going to play inside linebacker, but I bet they're going to move him. I sure as heck would. So you got to find ways to get Verse loose, stunts, different blitz packages to open him up, whatever it is.
You know, I'm gonna just say this. I'm jealous of you. You look like you're living in paradise right now.
Held a great virtual background there, Brian. Really good virtual background.
Listen,
it's not, that's the real deal.
And so I'm gonna ask you this: if we're talking about the real deal, they're saying that this Florida State secondary is gonna be it. Jaden Daniels and company are gonna want to tear this thing apart. That is gonna be a big part of what LSU wants to do. We know Brian Kelly is gonna want to run the ball, but ultimately, it's a quarterback's game. We know that that's what football is turned into. Do you think that I'm missing the name, Fentrell Cypress and company get it done on the back end, or will this be a track meet on grass?
I think it's the latter. I think they'll make some plays, but Malik Neighbors for LSU, that is a national football player in waiting.
Yeah.
The only reason he's not there already, he's not 3 years removed from the national or from high school.
Right.
You're going to have plays where he does his thing. The question is, can they get Mason Taylor the ball? Obviously, he's a very big-time player. He was the guy that caught the 2-point conversion against Bama, et cetera. They're going to have to move it around a little, but at the end of the day, it's Malik Neighbors for them. And they also have a couple other guys that were highly recruited. Let's see, Brian Thomas in particular. He was a big-time player. He's a big-bodied kid. If I'm FSU, I'm worried about him because he's 6'4". Kind of like Johnny, those up-top plays when you get in the red zone, look, man, on the outside, you can't, you can only put so many guys out there. That would be my concern. I've got the Noles winning 41-38 to put the perspective. Wow. I don't think it's going to be a defensive game.
All right.
Yeah, Florida State last year, number 21 scoring defense in the country, number 15 total defense, but the LSU offense is that high-powered. Brian, thanks for joining the show and giving us your take on LSU and Florida State this weekend.
Thank you, sir. You all have a great day.
Yes, sir.
You too, Chief.
Now, look, there's the rundown, Dono, on this game. If you're at FanDuel.com, are you taking Florida? We've heard so much about Florida State here, but then there's the mighty SEC that people love to scream about. Where do you lean?
I still lean to LSU over FSU. And listen, I know that obviously based on the season Florida State just had last year, Mike Norvell is starting to change that narrative. He still has a poor record against ranked opposition. And LSU last year in that season opening matchup, it was mostly self-inflicted wounds why they didn't win that game last year and Florida State was able to hold on. And we saw how much better LSU got as the season goes on. Jaden Daniels, and he mentioned the receivers and Mason Taylor, the tight end, who's going to be a big part of that LSU offense. I'm still leaning to LSU, but the part that I agree about wholeheartedly is high-scoring football game. Because, again, Caroline laid it out with LSU secondary. Brian talked a little bit about it with how Florida State can attack it. I still have nightmares, Drake and Kenton, about what Florida State did to the Miami Hurricanes last year. Basically just scoring points with complete – it was a game I never want to rewatch as long as I live. And, Johnny at 6'7", Keon Coleman, that addition for Michigan State in the transfer portal. So I think a lot of this season for Florida State is going to be, does Jordan Travis find the sort of consistency he was developing late in the year last year? Because he can be such a dual threat weapon. He's been inconsistent at times during his career. So if he can have the type of season that they all want him to have up there in Tallahassee, they can take that team to new heights. I'm still leaning to LSU, but would not surprise me if Florida State can cover that 2.5-point spread or even win outright.
Ken, what do you got?
One thing that I find super interesting about the game from last year is you could tell that there was a little bit of trying to get guys to buy in to the program still at LSU.
Yeah.
And Florida State was already beyond that. And that, I think, was ultimately the difference. I'm looking particularly at Keyshawn Boutte, who, he looked, Boutte looked like Boutte in that game. It was not good. It was very, very rough. And so with that being said, you're looking at an LSU team that at this point, everybody should be bought in. You know that his system can take you to an SEC championship. So there should be no arguing. There should be no, well, I want to do it my way. Well, brother, you have no rings on your finger. And this guy has gotten you to the promised land. You just weren't good enough this year. I think that the buying in of the culture and the talent that LSU has with those tackles getting a year older, as Brian Smith talked about, I think LSU gets it done. And I know Florida State fans are going to tell me how I'm disrespecting them and call me everything but a good Christian. I'm all right with that. I'm okay with that because I'm telling you, I wouldn't be mad if Florida State wins this game either. I wouldn't be mad if the announcers are saying, here's Johnny every other play because he's running deep again. But if I had to put my money on it, I go with LSU. Again, LSU if I was on FanDuel, that's where I'm going.
Look, LSU Tigers, the SEC, Brian Kelly had a hell of a first year. They're the team to beat here. I really believe, again, the SEC moniker carries so much that LSU has a leg up in this game. But not so fast. Florida State's absolutely going to beat LSU this weekend, and I will put any amount of money at FanDuel.com. Look, from Jared Verse to Patrick Payton to Gilbert Edmond, this defensive line for Florida State is what I think it's the best in the country. And I get it. LSU's offensive line is not bad by any means, but I wouldn't put them in the top 3 in the SEC, which is daunting in itself. But I think the Florida State defensive line has a way with LSU. And in the end, I have Florida State winning by 14. I have a 2-touchdown victory for Florida State on Sunday. But that all boils down.
I'm sorry, but Dono, please keep Drake away from FanDuel because he's betting rusty toes. He's betting the house. Listen,
he's the really customer. FanDuel.
Exactly. I see why FanDuel wants us to talk about it so much because you must be on that thing running up a check, brother.
I keep FanDuel in business. I personally keep them in business.
At this point, you should be sponsoring them, okay? They should be reading Drake Toll ad reads during all of their events. Listen, I don't disagree with you that Florida State has a shot to win this. A double-digit win here?
14 points. 14 points.
Wow.
14
That's
points.
why, like, for me, honestly, like, I look at this as a coin flip matchup. Drake clearly does not. He thinks the coin is a 2-headed coin with Florida State as heads on it.
Yeah. I don't think LSU. I think LSU finishes in the top 3 in the SEC West. I have enough confidence in Florida State for them to go to the college football playoff, win 10, 11 games in the regular season this year as well. And maybe that's one of my bold predictions, but we're going to get to the end of the year and it's not going to feel so bold. You're going to look back at the ACC schedule and go, yeah, all right, 11-1.
I agree with that take. I agree that they could make the playoff. I just don't think that they're 14 points better than LSU. That is where you lost.
Yeah,
I was with you. I'm with you when you're right. But you know, that was the moment where I had to jump off the ship. Okay, because that's a little, But yeah, I'll tell you this much. I do think that Florida State is going to be an amazing team this year. I feel that 100%. This game in particular, I don't think would be a fair barometer for either one of these conferences. Say like, oh, the SEC is this or the ACC is that because of this game. But like you said, that Florida State team surely does have a ceiling of a playoff appearance and
the number 4 transfer class in America too.
Yeah,
I mean, this team was already really good, and now they're even better. And maybe they're not 14 points better, but they're 14 points better on Sunday, right? And maybe you look up in week 6 and you say, hey, these are 2 very different teams. But I just like 38-24. I'm sitting at 38-24. Florida State wins this game. Maybe it's tied going into the 4th, but they're going to pull this out by 14 points, Dono.
Well, and the big thing that I'm looking at, and we saw this play out, with what happened to Florida last night against Utah. And this happens sometimes when you have week 1 or week 0 matchups with really strong sides. I mean, in this case with FSU and LSU, they're both top 10 teams this year. Are there going to be these mental week 1 mistakes? Because listen, Georgia is opening against Tennessee Martin. Alabama is opening up against Middle Tennessee State. Not everybody are playing marquee matchups week 1. And sometimes just the sync is not there. And that was something I thought that cost LSU that game last year, were self-inflicted wounds. If not for self-inflicted wounds by Billy Napier, Florida could have made a much better statement against Utah last night. So will one of these teams fall into that trap? I mean, Chip Kelly, obviously another year with his personnel at LSU. Mike Norvell, who went from a couple years ago being a laughing stock to now he's one of the more respected coaches in the country based on what happened with Florida State last year. Are they going to get through it without some of those self-inflicted wounds and mental mistakes?
Now, Dono, you should know better than anybody. Talking about Alabama's first game, you cannot sleep on those Blue Raiders.
I was hoping you wouldn't. I was hoping you wouldn't bring that up. I knew I should not have thrown that lure out there because Kenton.
I think what you're saying is that's one of the bigger games in week 1. This could go either way.
All I'm saying is, if anybody's talking about the Blue Raiders as an easy win, it should not be Miami folks.
I have that much respect for Alabama, Kenton. That's what I did there. I don't think Nick Saban is going to fall into that trap that the worst Miami team in 20 years fell into last year.
Hey, Money Milroe is going to be ready for game 1. Money Milroe should be doing something good there. So I feel you there. But no, I 1,000% agree. Week 1s, you see a lot of things that are interesting. Last night, watching the NC State UConn game, I saw a lot of terrible gap discipline by NC State. And they were doing a great job of tackling in coverage. They were right where they had to be. But that gap discipline in the run game, especially in the 3-3-5, it got them gassed a little bit. And so bringing that back to these games with national implications, I mean, if you're talking about giving Benson a lane because somebody's out of their gap, if he's even, he's leaving. That boy packing the mail, it's up. So, I agree that this week 1 is going to be about who doesn't beat themselves most of the time. But in this game, I think that these two teams are good enough and experienced enough that this ain't going to be somebody beating themselves. There's going to be somebody winning it.
Well, here at Locked On, guys, we know that Zach Blackerby is our grand puba of all of our college shows, and I'm sure he's got a great take on LSU Florida State. At the outside world, though, you know him as the host of Locked On Auburn. Today, he is here to throw punches across college football with the biggest storylines in the Blackerby Blitz. It is the Blackerby Blitz here on Locked On College Football Kickoff Live. We go through the biggest headlines, and Zach Blackerby, host of Locked On Auburn, reacts. New quarterback at Georgia, new quarterback at Ohio State. This Beck kid, the pictures are great. What do you think? I mean, you got some powerhouses, Alabama too, with new QBs at the helm. What does that change?
I don't think it changes anything. And I think when you're a top-tier program in college football, it's kind of fascinating because this isn't like this at any other level of competition, but we've seen Alabama win with subpar quarterback play. Then they started getting good quarterbacks, and then they were even better and unstoppable. And similar things with Georgia. I mean, they were winning before Stetson Bennett was good. Like, let's don't act like Stetson Bennett was always a good quarterback. He kind of grew into it because he was forced to constantly be at the level that all these other Georgia athletes were forcing him to get to. And they kind of drug him up. By the last year, his 12th year, Drake, of playing college football. All of a sudden he was good. And he's actually doing something in the NFL preseason. Props to him. Yay, Stetson Bennett. And I think Ohio State's the same thing. I mean, just the talent around these guys is so much higher than all the other teams that they're going to play. It's going to come down to the same teams regardless. So I don't think this is a big deal. And look, Locked On SEC host Chris Gordy, he has been waving the flag for Carson Beck to win Heisman. Our friends at FanDuel, the lines, he shows his Carson Beck for Heisman ticket to anyone who asks. So be sure to reach out to Gordy. He'd be happy to show it to you.
I love the mention of mediocre quarterbacks winning at Alabama. Blake Coker, I hope you are watching. Zach.
Jake Coker. Jake Coker,
Wow.
Blake Sims. They both won. You fused them together, Drake.
And that just proves my point further. Zach, East Carolina, UNLV, and Bowling Green. 3 teams that will play Michigan without Jim Harbaugh on the sideline. Do you think the Wolverines are just shaking?
I don't think they care. Jim Harbaugh may like it. Who knows? But like, I know they're getting a lot of flack. Michigan is for this self-imposed punishment, I guess, because it's really a slap on the hand. Because who cares? But one, like, they don't really have a hard 3-game stretch because Michigan plays no one other than Ohio State, and they could lose that game and still make the college football playoff. But also, who cares? Who cares? I mean, the fact that he's having to be punished at all for buying some kids some hot dogs, get out of here with any of this. Let the guy coach.
Yeah, they're not going to need him for these 3 games. It's a joke of a suspension, and it's, again, slap on the wrist just to say that we did it. Speaking of doing things to say that we did them, let's go to Arizona State, where the 2-10 Sun Devils this year won't be able to go to a bowl game.
I cover Auburn, right? And for basketball a few years ago, Bruce Pearl's like, you know what? We're not going to the NCAA tournament this year. And it's like, well, that was like the worst roster we've had in the last 10 years. Like, the timing's always funny, Drake. I don't know. It's Arizona State. Who cares?
I don't know if any Sun Devil fans are watching, but I would like to think they cares. And
shout out to Richie Bradshaw, host of Locked On Sun Devils.
Yeah, this makes no difference. They're not going to a bowl anyway, so why not? Hey, you know what? Northwestern bowl ban this year. Yep, that's right, self-imposed. The whole Zach.
Yes.
The whole Auburn coaching thing, Brian Harsin didn't work out in the end. So they've hired an upstanding American hero, a guy who has coached from a hospital, a good, strong Christian man, Hugh Freeze.
Yes.
It's the new Auburn coach. He has hired deposed Baylor offensive coordinator, a deposed Baylor defensive coordinator. And I'm sure that you couldn't be happier with all of this.
Well, to be fair, last time we got somebody that Baylor didn't want, Auburn won the SEC West with Jarrett Stidham. So I think maybe there's something to that, Drake. No, the potato famine at Auburn is over. The Boise boys, the potato posse, they are no longer with us, and everybody couldn't be happier. I'm actually wearing a jacket right now, and it's very hot in Alabama, but it's freezing throughout the SEC because Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers, they are issuing a freeze warning starting this Saturday when the Auburn Tigers host UMass.
Do you think that 5-7 Auburn takes the pity bowl or rejects it before next season?
I don't think there's any chance Auburn goes 5-7 this year.
4-8. Zach Blackerby, you heard it here first.
No.
Locked On Auburn. Oh, you're the 10-2 guy?
I'm the 7-5 guy, which I think is a very measured take.
Yes. 7-5. Auburn is back. Auburn is back. 7-5. That's Zach Blackerby. The Blackerby Blitz. Yeah, Zach Blackerby there, really high on the Auburn Tigers. Just shocking, guys. Look, there are some best bets in I know all these lines are nuts, but there are some best bets in college football coming up at FanDuel. Dono?
Well, first of all, I am definitely looking at the odds this weekend, my friends, and I'm getting ready for the NFL season as well with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. That is a great deal right there in itself. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is so easy to use, and you can bet on everything from the spreads to player props and more. We've been talking about these games all show long, some of these big spreads, some of these small spreads. Take advantage, guys. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Yeah, guys, the FanDuel lines for week 1 look difficult. A lot of them are massive, but is one of them too big? Locked On Bets hosts Lee Sterling and your boy Q have a lock.
Open it. Lee has the key to the lock of the day.
This time we're going to focus in on Penn State versus West Virginia. FanDuel.com line on this one. Penn State minus 20.5 points versus West Virginia. Lee, how you seeing this one? Break it down for us.
Yeah, so Penn State, talented team. They got some receivers. They got a couple running backs. And defense front seven is really good. Where they're not so good as quarterback, brand new quarterback. I mean, do you want to lay 3 touchdowns when you're facing a team that is competitive with a brand new quarterback? Also, pretty much a brand new secondary, 4 out of 5 guys left. So I think Penn State, if they find that quarterback, they'll be in good shape, but they might be a tad overrated. 6-0-1 against the spread down the stretch last year. When they played Utah last year in that bowl game, Utah lost their quarterback. Cam Rising went out. As soon as he went out of that game, the game was over. So they were gifted that win here. West Virginia, a couple of things I like. They got this running back named C.J. Donaldson. Watch him, Q, tonight. 6'2", 240. Now, you look at his stats, you're like, oh, he ran for 526 yards last year. Nothing impressive. 8 touchdowns, that's decent. But here's what pops out. 6 yards per carry. He was hurt a bunch last year, even when he played. Missed a couple games, and he was a tight end. He comes from Gulliver Prep in Miami. Saw this kid in high school, play tight end. Thought, oh, this is a nice tight end. But they saw something. They moved him to running back. That's the high school where Sean Taylor played. This kid's a monster. Could have a big game here. Once he gets going in the secondary, almost impossible to bring down, and surprisingly good speed here. Also pilfered kid from Kent State named Jashawn Polk as a kick returner. He might set up some nice field position for him. And West Virginia's defense isn't great. Their pass defense, not good at all, but Penn State's going to run the football. That's the one thing West Virginia does well on defense. Against ranked opponents last year, they gave up just 3.5 yards per carry and just 120 rushing yards per game. They're going to be fired up for this game. This used to be a huge rivalry game, almost on the lines of like Pitt, Penn State. So Pitt, West Virginia is going to be a big game. Level 2 lock.
Boom, level 2 lock right there, and I'm with it. I am with it. I know West Virginia is not the West Virginia that they once were or want to be, and I know they're still trying to build, but there you go. Penn State, minus 20.5 versus West Virginia. Feel like that's a little high. Lee Sterling hits them with the level 2 lock, and we could appreciate that. Lock of the day, Penn State and West Virginia.
More like a level 2 loss. What are we doing here? This is the game. I need everybody to gather together and understand. West Virginia lost all of its wide receivers, all of its corners. They replaced the OC and pretty much the entire offensive staff. The only reason Neil Brown has not been fired yet is because his buyout is so large. It is a night game, whiteout, Penn State on NBC. And anybody in their right mind is level 2ing. I don't even know what level 2 means. I don't even know if that's good or bad, but I do know that I would not bet against a Penn State team that only lost to Ohio State and Michigan last year, Dono. Penn State is going to win this game by 4 touchdowns and 5 if they really want to.
You know, I hate to argue with a level 2 lock, but
The
thing is, like, okay, when I started,
you know what, Dono, you're a level 2 guy. I really do.
Level 2 host, baby. Level 2 host.
I'm not even going to bet the other side of it. I think I'm just going to sit this one out because on the one hand, listen, I am keenly aware of the handiwork of Penn State's defensive coordinator, Manny Diaz, and I feel like the other shoe's going to drop at some point, and they're going to get burned in a few games this year. I just don't think West Virginia is the team to do that. And so when I start to hear the logic behind West Virginia covering a big spread, a 20.5-point spread, then I start to think, okay, well, the game must be in Morgantown, right? No, like you said, Drake, it's a whiteout game, night game, Happy Valley. I think Penn State's going to win that game by 4 touchdowns. So I'm
of all of the games.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's the one that they picked, Ken.
It's hard, but I agree with you, Drake.
I'm going to say this. I never bet against a team with 1 cast technician, let alone 2. Shout out to the King twins up there, Kalen and Kobe. One of the best corners in the nation, one of the upcoming linebackers in the nation. Yeah. Not to mention, Singletary is so good. The back behind him is probably going to be all conference, who just transferred out of there. Like running backs have the lowest, what's the word I'm looking for? Franchise tag value of every position. And yet everybody's talking about Singletary as a first-round draft pick. Mm-hmm. I'm sold. I don't want to hurt Zach Blackerby's feelings, but I remember watching him against Auburn, and I thought to myself, yeesh, this kid's the real deal. This is going to be some problems. So with that being said, Penn State to cover, Penn State to beat them boys senseless and send them back to Morgantown limping and singing country roads. Take me home to a field where we belong. Because it's not in Happy Valley. It's not there.
Oh, look, you know what? Give me Penn State minus 20.5. That's a level 15 lock.
Wow.
Yep, 100%. Level 15. I don't know.
I will say, Drake, I'm bookmarking this because if West Virginia does cover, I will make a video apology to my guys at Locked On Bets, Q and Lee. I will go out of my way to apologize if WVU does cover.
Your boy Q, Waco's own. Guys, I've got Penn State all day. I went to FanDuel, saw some of these lines. The one that I'm going to pick out. So Look, I'm a Baylor grad. I graduated from Baylor like 3 months ago, right? So I'm supposed to root for them. No chance they cover 28 points this weekend. They've got Texas State, and a lot of these games get overlooked, like Oklahoma, Arkansas State. OU's a 36-point favorite. They don't cover 36. They get backdoored to 28 or something like that. Baylor this week, G.J. Kinney, the new head coach at Texas State, we had him on our show. Unbelievable. He went 12-2 his first year as a head coach in college football. They're going to play this game close against the Bears. They have one of the best recruiting classes in the country. 28, too much. Baylor wins this game by 17-21. Blake Shapen, still a liability at quarterback at times. That's one of my picks this week. Dono, what do you like on the board right here?
I'm going to go back to that North Carolina, South Carolina, because, there are so many of these gigantic spreads scare me a little bit week one when we haven't really seen anybody yet. But I've got a pretty good idea, being an ACC guy, what Drake May and North Carolina bring to the table. I've got a pretty good idea what Spencer Rattler and company in South Carolina bring to the table. I like the line, but I like UNC to cover -2.5. I see the Tar Heels winning this one by probably 6 points to a touchdown, and I think it's going to be an entertaining game. I'm looking forward to watching. Probably an offense explosion on both sides. Whoever gets the football last will probably be at an advantage, but I think Drake May is going to have a field day, and I think they're going to cover.
Yeah, so in the battle of the orange teams here, in terms of Tennessee and Virginia, last time there was a battle of the orange that Tennessee was involved in, it was in the Orange Bowl, in which they beat Clemson handily. They are going to scold UVA. That game is going to look very bad. As soon as I heard that Chico Bennett wasn't playing, I don't trust Tony Muskett. I don't trust Tony Elliott. I don't trust that team as a whole. And it's really unfortunate with all the things that they've been through. But, at some point in time, you've got to play football again, and you got to look at what's going on in front of you, be where your feet are. And I think that their feet are going to be in the air a lot because those boys from Tennessee are going to be picking them up and putting them down forcefully. 27.5 ain't enough. Tennessee covers easily.
Yeah. Other two that I've circled here. Welcome to the ACC. Cal -7 at North Texas. I think North Texas covers +7 here. Cal's just a bad football team. So if you want, take that for what it is. They're just not very good at the whole game of football. North Texas at home, chip on their shoulder. They are facing a team who now got a grant to the ACC. They're going to come out firing and at least cover 7. Cal might win it by 3, but it's going to be ugly and terrible. If you have, I think it's ESPN Plus. If you have ESPN Plus, don't watch that game. And then another new ACC team, Stanford. -3 at Hawaii. Stanford is maybe the only Power 5 team that I could see going 0-12 this season. I have mapped it out where they might not win a game this year. And that you're giving me plus points with Hawaii. You're giving me a plus money line on Hawaii. Give me the Rainbow Warriors all day long.
I don't hate that.
It's really, it hurts for us two ACC guys to look at this and say this, but you're absolutely right. That Stanford team, it's a little bit of a train wreck in almost every regard. And you're telling yourself they're also traveling to have a time difference that puts them behind, which West Coast teams are not used to. That is insane to put a West Coast team behind their normal time zone. It's right now it's Pac-12 after dark, where the Pac-12 is going to get packed up after this game in terms of Stanford. Getting the Rainbow Warriors and all that they've been through and what's going on those islands and kind of the rally cry behind them. I think they cover and win this game outright.
Yeah. Well, Dono, before we get out of here, let's take the big one. LSU, Florida State, final score prediction there.
Yeah, I'm going to go with LSU to win and just cover by the skin of their teeth. I'm going to go with LSU by 3. So I'm going to say pretty high scoring game based on, the quarterbacks and the defensive secondaries. I'm going to say a 38-35 LSU, which means I'm going to have my popcorn ready for this one.
Kenton, same question.
I think that these defenses are being disrespected just a little bit. I think that there's a lot of offensive firepower here, but I think these defenses are being disrespected just a little. I've got LSU winning the close one, 28-24.
This game for me, 38-24, 14-point win for Florida State in the end. Again, it might be 24-24 going into the fourth. I have too much confidence in the Florida State defense for them to give this game up. I've got FSU being the one bright spot in the ACC this weekend after the addition of SMU, Cal, and Stanford. Guys, that is Locked On College Football Kickoff Live. Alex Dono from Locked On Canes, Kenton Gibbs from Locked On ACC, Drake Toll from Locked On Big 12. We'll be back live next week. Thanks for making Locked On College Football Kickoff your lunchtime listen every single Friday. We'll be with you all season long, covering the biggest storylines in the sport. Great show, you guys. Dono, great to be with you. Kenton Gibbs, always a pleasure. Hey, next week, same time, same place. This has been, and it always will be, Locked On College Football Kickoff Live.